At work, I think we're putting way too much focus on people's individual performance. And I'm going to talk about today why that's a problem and what we could do instead. But first, I want to tell you how I came to that conclusion and why I believe I can talk about this with any credibility at all. I have a background in professional sports. I used to play handball at professional level. I was part of a team that won the European Champions League twice, represented Austria at the 1992 Olympics. And if you're a Kiwi, you probably haven't seen much handball. If you're from Europe, Latin America, Asia, you will know it's a really fast-paced team sport. It's, think water polo on land, footballs with your hand, and it's the second biggest sports in Europe, Olympics since the 1970s. 4 years ago, I started CrossFit. And yes, of course, it's a cult. But so is Agile. So it goes really well with my personality, I think. CrossFit is a mix of high-intensity interval training, gymnastics, and weightlifting. And its aim is to promote general fitness. People compete to find out who's the fittest and most versatile. And the third thing I do in life is I work for a company. It's called Nomad, which I co-founded about 15 years ago. I coach, I train, and I get around a lot. Just in the last 3 years, I've been working with 21 companies, both in New Zealand and internationally. And because I have great colleagues, I have access to their data and stories and anecdotes too. And I've observed quite a lot of parallels between handball, CrossFit, and all the companies that I've seen lately. I'm not going to tell you anything new right here, because we all know that work is a team effort. And we know this because decades of research and literature show it. And the research and literature show that outcomes are achieved nowadays by teams, not individuals. And you think about the last 20 years, we have seen the advent of Agile and new ways of working, and they all have the teams at heart. But something weird's going on. Every organization I've talked to is obsessed with individual performance, like a dog with a bone. Our incentives, our bonus systems, our reward structures, our performance reviews and development plans, they're all geared towards the individuals. So we're working in teams, but we're still doing all those things. So let me invite you to the world of sports. Handball, obviously a team sport. I can't achieve anything on my own. I can't even play on my own. We succeed and we fail together. And I've played a lot of average games where we still won. And the other way around, played amazingly well, but we still lost. CrossFit, on the other hand, is an individual sport, obviously. I'm on my own, I win by myself, I lose by myself. I'm basically a one-man team, which means I need to cover all the bases and have no gaps as an athlete. And to be honest, that was a revelation to me. And taking that to work, I find the problem we have is that at work, we treat people like individual athletes in what is fundamentally a team sport. And none of them are better or worse. It's just when we use methods from one in the other, tension and friction occur. So what's going on? Let me start with CrossFit. Individual performance, I can measure my performance. I can measure everything in most individual sports. In CrossFit, it's the number of repetitions, number of rounds, the time it took me to do a workout, I can measure stuff. And because I'm a one-man team, I need to be an all-round athlete. I need to cover absolutely everything. Something I realized at my first CrossFit competition. I just thought, I'm probably going to nail this. Really good at jumping. There's a few other things that I'm pretty good at. I have some gaps, but I'll be okay. I wasn't okay. I finished really, really, really low. And that is because as an individual athlete, weaknesses, gaps will cost you. And what you do in individual sports is you work on your weaknesses. It is seriously 80% working on weaknesses, 20% to your strengths in individual sport. Contrast that with handball. Here to optimize team performance, where any development plans need to be for teams. Because the individual in a team sport is secondary. You can't win, you can't lose by yourself, you can't even play. And individual performance is only relevant as the contribution it makes to the overall goal, not the individual performance count in itself. And I really can't reiterate that enough, how important that is. Individual performance is important, but only in how it contributes to team performance. And for that, we need to look for gaps in team competency, not individual ones. And what I do as an individual is I flip this around. I don't look for individual all-roundedness. If I do that, I'm going to fail. I'm looking for the few areas where I can be absolutely world-class. I'm looking at my strengths and I make them even stronger. 80% of the work I do is on strength, 20% only on my weaknesses. And the other thing is, how do we actually measure? In a team sport, you can't measure anything because it doesn't mean anything. You can't look at the handball team and go, 30 goals are great, 20 goals are not. It totally depends on whether you win or lose. And the context is really complex. Your opponent changes. It changes whether you have a home and away game. It changes, the surface changes. It's a lot more complex than CrossFit or most individual sports. The only reason the only way that you can measure anything, the only way where you know where you stand is by comparing yourself against other teams. And you either play them directly or you watch them to see what excellence looks like, hoping that one day you'll be allowed to play them. So it's very clear to me and blatantly obvious that work nowadays is way more than handball, way more like handball than CrossFit. And yet here we are. We keep forgetting that individuals don't deliver custom outcomes, teams do. And even if you're a manager or a CEO, unless you're a one-man company, this is a team sport. And this is even more pronounced now with hybrid ways of working, where we have no other option than give up control of assessing the individual. This is a quote that I really like that Brenda got from interviewing someone at in a New Zealand company, actually Pia, who's here. But it wasn't only Pia from Springload who said this, but it was echoed by other New Zealand leaders and also a few leaders in the US that with hybrid ways of working, this is the only option that we have because we have no control over the individual and what they do. We can't tell who's performing well and who isn't. So we need to focus on assessing teams only. And in the comparison of handball, CrossFit at work, they're all good things. But things do go wrong when we apply techniques from individual endeavors to a team environment. And there's quite a number of things that I think that we have taken from individual work and individual sports and still use in our companies. One is individual performance management. I'm sure most of you have had performance reviews. How was yours? Nice? Good? Do you remember? Did you like it? Or was it more intense like this? And did you walk away with a development plan of things that you have no interest in learning? So-called opportunities for improvement. If you hated yours, you're definitely not alone. And it's not just that people hate those performance reviews, the yearly performance reviews. They're also totally, utterly useless because they give incorrect information. There's research from that's published in the Journal of Applied Psychology with 4,500 participants that 62% in variance of ratings depends on raters' perception. So that means most reviews say way more about the rater than the person who's been rated. And we know that they are, not only do we know that they are useless, they're also wrong. And 58% of all executives, that's research by Deloitte, believe that their current performance management approach drives neither employee engagement nor high performance. So we're just playing performance theatre. And you might think, well, it's not my money, it's not my problem, but what's the damage? Well, the damage is that waste of time. 2 million hours a year, too many zeros. 2 million hours a year is just what Deloitte sink into performance management, which is mostly managers talking behind closed doors about people. And the damage is like, what could we do with all this time? It's not like the world doesn't have problems that we need to solve. We could do so much instead of wasting our time. So this is just one example of a tool that we're using wrongly. The other one is development plans. Development plans, don't know about you, but when I used to be young and employed, some of my personal development plans were heavily skewed towards that traditional focus on your weakness, 80% weakness, 20% strength pattern. My last review, where I had a short endeavor into project management, not very good. But I remember sitting there and talking to my boss, and he was telling me that I needed to learn financial accounting and contractual obligations and do training courses in those things. And I was just going, oh my God, just shoot me now. So I walked away with a list of things that I didn't want to learn, didn't have talent for, and didn't have any interest in whatsoever. And I think that's what focusing on weaknesses does to people. And I also strongly believe that the way that we measure, assess, evaluate, and improve performance is really no longer relevant in the modern workplace. But we've got to do something. What do we do instead? And the first thing is, well, first of all, stop what we're doing because it's useless, costly, and damaging. So let's stop it, whether or not we have an alternative. But there is an alternative. I think we should learn from team sports. And the first thing is, let's compare teams. We can't measure what teams perform or how they perform. We've tried it. We've tried story points and velocity and cycle time and throughput and measuring the widget a team produces. But it doesn't actually say anything because like in a team sport, it's super context dependent. And it's not a measure that we can use. We can't measure productivity and knowledge work or team sports very well or teamwork. So I really believe we can fix this by comparing teams. And I know there are agile coaches in this audience, and I also know what you're thinking because this is every agile coach ever. Whoa, you don't compare teams. What about psychological safety? Yeah, take that, Gavin. What about that? But just stay with me because I'm saying compare, not compete. It's not like I'm saying smash them. It's about finding out where you stand and then where you can improve from. And it's even easier at work than in sports because it's not a zero-sum game, which means for me to win, you don't have to lose. So I suggest go and see. Go and see, compare and learn. And what does it look like? Go and visit other companies, both in person and remote. Go and see teams within your own company. What are they doing that we are not doing? And the other way around. Ask them to compare themselves and see what inspires them. What can they learn? What can they try? What do you want to learn? and maybe go somewhere and realize we thought we were really good at this, but actually now I can see what excellence really looks like. So go and see, and maybe also formalize it a little bit. Here's a thing that I got inspired by when working at Snapper. Some credit and shout out to Snapper, doing an excellent job there. And that is working with team strengths and weaknesses and formalizing it along two main axes. Is a team currently demonstrating the skill, yes or no? And do they have the confidence to execute? So you want to be in the upper right corner. Skills, the team have a skill, they're comfortable doing it, and they're using it on a regular basis. They can also be competent, they're demonstrating it, but they don't have the chance to do it very often. You got the lower left corner where the team has low confidence because they haven't tried it very much, and they also have low skill. Could be a gap where they need to learn something. And then in the upper left corner, skills the team are comfortable with, but not actually very good at. And maybe they don't even know about this. And I use this visualization to have team assess themselves, usually together with a coach. What are the things that we need to perform great as a team? And then let's plot ourselves along those axes. So we can see a team that has a lot of skill in most areas. There is a gap in testing, and they don't get the chance to problem solve very often. So it's not up to them to decide what they can do with that information and how they can learn. There are two areas that I find really interesting and that I look out for as a coach when I do this with teams. The one is the high confidence, but not demonstrating. That's hubris. That's the ones mailing it, but they don't even know what great looks like. And that's when going out, talking to other teams, watching other teams, what that could look like is really helpful. And the other one is they're doing it, but they don't think they're very good at it. So that's low self-esteem. And again, comparing to other teams can be really helpful. We can actually see, looking at everyone else, we're pretty good at this. This is just us having low self-esteem. And people often think that because we have team assessments and we just work as teams, that we don't develop people. Of course we develop people. But what differs is how we develop them and what's in their development plans. Because if we coach to strength and to team gaps, then weakness are really not opportunities for improvement. They're a sign that something should be done by someone else. It's a gap, and if you don't have the talent or the inclination to learn that skill, it should be supplemented by the rest of the team. So develop people to fill the gaps. Like, I won't let my weakest penalty shooter take a penalty in the finals when it counts. I want to pick someone who doesn't want to learn it and has little natural talent to learn it. So fill the gaps, develop people in accordance with their talents and what they like to do, and then find a team where they are a good fit. And a really good way for eliciting this is asking people, who do you want to be in 2 years? And that forms the core of their development plan. And they usually choose things that they are good at and they enjoy, not their weaknesses. So here's what we need to do. First of all, we need to define and enforce a base level threshold. There's some core skills and behaviors that are absolutely foundational for anyone in the workplace. If you don't have them, we don't want you. It's like if you can't even catch and throw a ball, or you're not a team player, you won't even make it to the practice field. And if you don't know the basics of collaboration and interacting with people, or don't have the desire or ability to learn, sorry, we can't use you in our company. And I would like to ask HR for help to Make sure that we only have people who are team players and have the basics of collaboration in place. Secondly, teach people and organizations how to work in team. Don't accept individual athletes. And I've heard individual athletes talk about how much they hate team sports, how much they hate being dependent on other people to succeed. In sports, they have a choice. In our current work environment, we don't. You don't want to be dependent on other people? I'm sorry to bring it to you, but you just are. And the last thing is compare and develop teams. Make a plan for the teams, have teams figure out where they stand by comparing themselves with other teams, and then help them make a plan to perform better as teams. That is all I have to say. And I have made a wonderful little facilitation guide that you can download if you like to run with your team a workshop about finding out what skills they need and how to assess themselves.